was born with physical and mental disabilities that mean he needs extra support. So at 40 years old, he's living in a group home and his younger brother helps him out a lot. Robert has a job assembling spray bottles at a nonprofit agency. Now, he gets paid by the bottle, but the problem with that is he can only use his left hand to do the job. And that's because his right arm is bent toward his chest and he can't grip anything with that other hand. As you can imagine, with these types of challenges and the job's repetitive motions, he sometimes can't keep up with his peers. Well, that means he earns less, and he often has wrist and back pain. If you or I passed Robert on the street, we probably wouldn't even notice him. But let's imagine if we were to encounter Robert for a semester in our Entrepreneurial Engineering Design studio. This is how Stephen met Robert. Stephen is pursuing his engineering degree at Lawrence Tech, and he's smart and conscientious, he's hardworking, he's fully engaged every time he comes to class. As part of our sophomore design class, Stephen traveled to Robert's worksite. Well, he immediately saw how hard it is to assemble a spray bottle with one hand, and he heard Robert talk about not being able to keep up. Stephen decided to do something about that. How can we create a classroom environment that motivates students like Stephen to put the entrepreneurial mindset into action? There is one thing that I see igniting entrepreneurial mindset in the classroom, and that thing is empathy. Now, you may know from the work of places like IDEO that empathy is important for good design. But are we as engineers well known for being especially empathetic? If the answer is no, are there ways we can encourage empathy in the classroom? I mean, can we teach it? How? In the design studio, there are 3 things we do to encourage empathy. We intentionally cultivate immersive experiences. We intentionally seek authentic customer interaction. And we intentionally design for diverse customers. So let's unpack each of these. First, we intentionally cultivate immersive experiences. So why is that important? Well, the American Psychiatric Association says that empathy is teachable, but it requires practice and experience. So our course is created to be experiential. It's a studio where we're all immersed in the design process together from day one. But early in the semester, we also create experiences that get the students to walk a mile in someone else's shoes. On Stephen's first day in class, he took on simulated disabilities, and he had to do a variety of tasks all over campus. On his second day, he again took on simulated disabilities, and this time, he had to perform a series of assembly line jobs. Well, these experiences are eye-opening for the students. During our class discussions, we hear comments like, "I never even thought about," or "I can't believe how hard it was. I felt so helpless. I felt so frustrated." We also hear comments like, "I started to wonder what the rest of life might be like. What other barriers are out there, and how do people handle those?" So within the first week of the semester, we are not only encouraging empathy, we're creating curiosity. Now, your context may not be exactly like mine, but how can you help your students walk a mile in someone else's shoes? How can you encourage empathy that creates curiosity? Second, because empathy doesn't happen in isolation, we intentionally seek authentic customer interaction. Not surprisingly, sociologists at the University of Michigan report declining empathy among college students. And they say this is due in part to an increase in technology use. The lack of authentic personal interaction in our world can certainly make it convenient not to care. So if we want to encourage empathy, we have to battle the isolation that technology brings. Students will think it's more efficient to interact via email or text or electronic survey. But we want our students to go the extra mile and meet people where they are. Stephen traveled to Robert's worksite 5 times as part of our design class. He learned to critically observe Robert's job process. He talked face-to-face with Robert to understand his needs, and he tested his ideas with Robert for hands-on customer feedback. Stephen came to really understand what Robert needed because he really understood how Robert felt. And at that point, he could make important connections between what Robert needed and the technical requirements of his design. So through personal interaction with real customers, we encourage empathy, but we also create connections. So I ask you, how can you help your students go the extra mile and meet people where they are? How can you encourage empathy that creates connections? And third, in the studio, we intentionally design for diverse customers. Empathy thrives in the unknown, and service learning research says that these types of experiences create a sense of discomfort that encourages empathy. So we want our students designing solutions for people who are different from them. We get them outside of their comfort zones, and we expose them to new issues and implications. We want them working side by side with people they would usually see as being miles apart. Well, Stephen and Robert were truly miles apart in every way. But as they worked together, Stephen developed a deep understanding of Robert's world. And Stephen had a unique vantage point in that he was seeing Robert's world with fresh eyes. He could see problems from a new angle. He could recognize new solutions. He could recognize how to create extraordinary value for Robert. So again, I ask you, how can you help your students work side by side with people that usually seem miles apart? How can you encourage empathy that creates value? So how did this combination of empathy and entrepreneurial mindset make a difference for Stephen and Robert? Well, Stephen's team designed and built a device that helps Robert assemble his spray bottles 39% faster using only one hand and with no pain. Stephen has secured some startup funding, and he is making more devices for customers like Robert. Robert traveled with the team to Washington, D.C. to demonstrate the new device, and they all got to meet our state representatives on Capitol Hill. Oh, come on, isn't that amazing? So I'll close with this. We set out to encourage empathy in our classroom, knowing it was important for good design. But now we see our students becoming curious through immersive experiences. They're making connections through authentic customer interaction. And they're creating value designing for diverse customers. So think about how encouraging empathy in the classroom could ignite the entrepreneurial mindset on your campus. Thank you.